What constitutes genius? Where is the line that defines genius and mental illness? An insanity that could produce impactful, memorable, culture-defining art that changed pop culture and caused one to suffer through it. How does one obtain this kind of talent? Is it intrinsic at birth? Can it be taught? Is it caused by an event such as a bash in the head or a stroke that can change one's perceptions? Or do foreign substances come into play, potentially bringing greater beings? And the most important question of them all, do androids really dream of electric sheep? One thing's for certain, we won't have any of these answers today.
Love it.
Hello and welcome back to the library. Before we get lost amongst the stacks, I would like to introduce my friend, somebody who joined me on the very first episode, and back for this one, Senor Big Poppy Primer himself, Rogelio Zimbron.
Aw shucks, thank you very much, Phil. I'm glad to do this again. Glad to be here talking a little bit about something I know a little more about this time. And I'm glad, a subject matter I know a little bit more this time, but not a author or literary genius that I actually know nothing about. So this is going to be cool.
Yeah, this guy's quite an exceptional character. Let's leave it as that. And I think I want to introduce something that's never happened before on this podcast. Rogelio brought a notebook to take notes throughout this entire process in order for him to go back for questions.
That's true. I'm getting a little more academic than last time. I realized I had these questions. I was like, hold on, we got to backtrack here because I either A, didn't have context, or now I know a little something and I just forgot. So it also looks nice, like a little leather-bound notebook. You know?
It is a beautiful notebook.
Aw, shucks.
I love a good notebook. That's a top quality one.
Yeah, I said, let's forget the laptop for today and just go quote-unquote old school. Just a little pen and paper.
Well, I'm here for it. It's
Sweet.
just wild and wonderful. Now, Rogelio, when we talked about a subject you would like for us to cover, we decided on the nebulous topic of sci-fi, and I genuinely struggled to choose a specific topic until, let's say, 48 hours before recording.
Jeez.
This isn't something because I find sci-fi as a topic challenging, even though it can be objectively obtuse at times, which at times, again, can make it more fun or frustrating depending on who you are as a reader. But because I find it was so much to chat about, going down this rabbit hole that I couldn't really decide on one topic at first. I went through numerous authors and spent a good amount of time trying to decide who to choose. Then I chose books and series I have read or plan to read, which I decided if I was going to have any book series, I won't cover one unless I've actually read the book thoroughly in the process.
Makes sense.
During that process. And the last one is understanding the history of how sci-fi books were published and why they were published that way was a topic that I will cover one of these days, but not today. So I also thought of doing something lighthearted, but my friend, this is the world of sci-fi.
Yeah.
It's about as easy to find a lighthearted topic, do an hour-long recording or more, as finding a nationally elected Republican that is loyal to the Constitution at this moment. Shade thrown so hard at those damn traitors at the moment. I was in a pickle. And then one day, so let's say 48 hours ago, it came to me like a flash, as if a giant golden head of Jesus and its all scaly, slippery, fishy glory decided for me who to cover. And that person, that wild topic of conversation, is a guy named Philip K. Dick. And Rogelio, I hope you hung up your sense of reality with your coat, because this is going to be a fucking wild ride.
All right.
And one that is difficult to do research and break it down into a narrative that will make sense to you, let alone to the people who are listening.
All right, I'm ready.
Now, do you know anything about Philip K. Dick before we start?
Except that you and him share the same name. That's it. Other than that, no, nothing. Other than his name, that's about it.
My surname is in fact Dick. No, that was that I actually got into that too, where that came from. So to get started, Philip Kindred Dick was born on December 16th, 1928. His father was Joseph Edgar Dick, and his mother was Dorothy Kindred. He and his twin sister, Jane Charlotte Dick, were both born 6 weeks prematurely. 6 weeks after their birth, however, Jane passed away. This isn't uncommon for twins, unfortunately, and to spoil it a little bit, it had a deep effect on Philip's life and his writing. The phantom twin motif would be a recurrent theme throughout all his works. I say spoiler, it's the only time we're actually going to talk about this, but it is a pretty recurring theme.
Gotcha.
So partially because I am immature and partly because I have an inquisitive mind, I wanted to know where the surname Dick came from. His father is Irish originally, which helped me narrow down because there are a lot of Dicks and a lot of Dicks originating and smattered all over the British and Irish Isles.
Okay.
And they spread all over America, apparently. It originated in Scotland and was brought to Northern Ireland through the kingdom of, I think it's Dal Riata. Dude, I don't speak barely English, and Gaelic is definitely not in my forte. Would it be Gaelic? I don't actually know what the Scots were spoken. They were Scots either, weren't they? They were Picts in the 5th century. All of it, I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah. And yes, if you were wondering, there is actually a Dick coat of arms.
Dang. All right. Now that you say that it could be Gaelic, I can see those syllables emanating from Gaelic, right? It's kind of a really consonant-heavy word. Okay, got it.
That tangent's over.
Yeah, okay, very good. We're done. All right.
His father worked at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which I'm sure is going to be targeted somewhere between the U.S. Department of Education, which apparently no longer exists, according to one man's tweet, and before the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives get it dissolved. That's the joke I'm making here. I don't know if that's going to happen. His family moved to the San Francisco Bay Area shortly after his birth. His father was transferred again, this time to Reno, and his mother, knowing that there's nothing good that lies ahead for them in Reno, refused to move. She dug her heels in, and soon the two divorced, which is a lesson learned here for people listening that, yes, indeed, saying no and refusing to somebody's demands when they think they have all the power actually does work at times. That's another shade being thrown, guys. Dorothy and Philip moved to Washington, D.C. Shade is where I'm throwing that shade in, where I believe she got a job working for the Department of Labor at that time. A department I'm still shocked is still around.
Yeah, me too.
I made that joke, but I also learned that the Department of Labor, after I made it, so let's say yesterday, was also targeted recently. So, well, D.C. didn't last very long either, and the Dicks moved back to California. This is a recurring theme to his life.
Okay.
He leaves and he comes back to California. This time, basically for good in his young life. His very early life, he was raised Quaker, and one source said that he went to Quaker schools, which would mean he was raised pacifist and with the concept of community, equality, and simplicity.
Got it.
But then he converted to Episcopalianism, which, for the lack of a better explanation, is how I refer to as Diet Catholic.
Diet Catholic.
And that's diet, not diet, which is something totally different in Catholicism. Or, you know what, it could just betterly be categorized as the Americanized version of the Anglican Church. There. Now that I've offended several major Christian religions, let's keep going.
Just do it. Just do them all while you're at it. Everyone will be mad at you.
So I saw you writing in your notebook. Do you have any questions yet?
No, I was just taking some of those basic notes when this guy was born. I'll hold one question to the end.
Okay.
Or whatever the end may be. Whatever, if there's an end to this one.
Yeah. Yes, we'll see. It was in California that Philip K. Dick first was introduced to science fiction. This was what he had to say about it. Quote, "I got interested in science fiction, however, totally by mistake. I was interested in science when I was a boy. I wanted to be a paleontologist. One day,
sick.
I know, right?
All kids want to do stuff with dinosaurs. Even that is just a through line throughout history. That's great. I love it.
Yeah, it's totally relatable. One day, I went to the local candy store to buy a copy of Popular Science.
Yeah.
And came across something by mistake called Stirring Science Stories.
Nice.
I didn't really know what it was, but it only cost 15 cents, a nickel more than a comic book. What it turned out to be, of course, was a science fiction magazine at that time called Pseudoscience.
Huh.
And boy, there was really some great stories in there. People went back in time. Other people fell over a wall that only had one side, so when they fell over, they were back on the first side again. Others traveled to the center of the universe where there was a gigantic flat plane where you can walk around. End quote.
That's cool. That's really cool the way people were thinking back then about some of these alternate realities.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yes, science fiction is pretty dope. And that was like before 1940. In a different interview, he stated this further about his first experience with sci-fi. Quote, I was 12 in 1940 when I read my first science fiction magazine. I came across the magazine, again, quite by accident. I was actually looking for popular science. I was amazed. Stories about science? At once, I recognized the magic which I had found in earlier times in the Oz books. This magic now coupled with magic wands, not with magic wands, but with science. In any case, my view became magic equals science, and science equals magic. Unquote. Shortly after this encounter, he also begins to consider writing as a profession. Quote, my mother was an editor for the U.S. Department of Labor, but her ambition was to write and sell stories and novels. It was from her that I got the idea that writing was a very important thing. I started on my first novel when I was 13 years old. It was called Return to Lilliput and was never completed, unquote.
Huh. Yeah. That's wild.
In grade school, he did pretty well by the accounts I read. He went to Berkeley High School and graduated in 1947 alongside fellow science fiction writer Ursula K. Le Guin. Though there's no indication that these two met each other or even knew each other in high school. It's just fucking small world shit. It's simple as that. Ursula K. Le Guin is like an incredibly important science fiction author.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
As you talk about these people, it makes me wonder how many of my favorite science fiction writers are influenced directly from these people. I can't even begin to appreciate maybe what the influence might be.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll talk about his influence in the future at one point. Yeah. Many times, like far in the future.
Yeah.
So like other people with at least means today, I don't think he had a lot of means, but it was easier for Phil to take a gap year before heading to college.
Mm-hmm.
I say gap year like he initially planned to go to college, but I couldn't find anything that really indicated that at any point. His mother became very worried about him when he said he wanted to move out of the house, claiming that she would call the cops if she did.
Really?
Yeah. You don't want to know why?
Why?
Quote, because, she replied to him, if you move out and leave me, you'll wind up a homosexual, unquote.
Jeez. Oh my God.
I know.
Yo, that's messed up. But also, I don't know why that's so funny, but that's wild. Oh my God. Was that do you think that was like a widely held belief back then? Or it was just something that she said to mess with him? Like that. That's wild.
Well, I wrote here this wasn't completely unwarranted, apparently. Not based on his behavior per se, but because he was moving out and moving into somebody who was openly gay, who was an openly gay poet.
Got it.
And he was as open as you can have been in the late 1940s, writing a poem called Homosexual or something of the sort. He moved into what is referred to now or back then as Bohemian accommodations on McKinley Street in Berkeley, which consisted of a floor of a warehouse converted into rooms.
Oh, wild. Cool.
Very fucking Brooklyn of him.
Yeah.
It's very like I've met people who live in these kind of situations. I've stayed in these. It's just like, wow, okay. Very it's something you can only do in your young adult life.
Yeah, 100%.
Philip conferred to one of his best friends who worked alongside him when he was working at a record shop that he was a virgin and he feared he was becoming a homosexual again. His friend's response, as he's a young man, was, and we're just going to say it here, he needs to find a nice piece of ass. So he married a frequent customer at the record shop. It's Jeanette Marlin in May 1949 is when they married.
Got it.
Yep. So that makes him, let's see, 18. No, he's 21. Yep. So he did attend the University of Berkeley later that year. He did not thrive in an environment where he had to go through mandatory ROTC training, which I mean, as somebody who was raised Quaker, even for a few years, totally checks out.
Yeah.
Mentally, it doesn't sound like he had a good time in college at all. It was in college where, let's say, some of his quirks, to be abstruse, began to affect his schooling. He suffered with ongoing anxiety attacks and complications. This wasn't the first bout of mental health crises for young Philly D here, and it certainly won't be the last. According to a write-up by Lawrence Sutton, one of his many, many biographers, he claims that, quote, starting in the 7th grade, however, Dick began suffering from bouts of extreme vertigo. The vertigo recurred with special intensity during his brief undergraduate stint. In his late teens, Dick later recalled he was diagnosed as suffering from schizophrenia, a label that terrified him. Other psychotherapists and psychiatrists in later years would offer other diagnoses, including that Dick was quite sane indeed. Unquote. Any questions yet?
No. I think timeline makes. I'm just writing down timeline notes. This is, I mean, he's moving pretty quickly here, just like right on through it. I just can't imagine at that time, psychology and psychologists were, fairly, how would I say, underexperienced at some of these types of, mental disorders and diseases at this time. So it makes me wonder, like, yeah, they diagnosed, but at that point, I think generally speaking, you were just diagnosed and said, like, this is what you got. Good luck.
Yeah, and I think schizophrenia was kind of a catch-all too.
Oh, that's true. I forgot that as people understood more about some of these disorders and diseases, well, mental disorders, they start to fragment and split them off into their subsets of whatever they are. But
yeah.
All right, so someone said he had schizophrenia, and then someone said he was completely sane.
Yeah,
all right.
Those were in later years, right?
Gotcha.
We will probably touch upon it later, and we're going to have to decide whether he was not, or probably not. Like I said, we're not going to answer that question,
True,
maybe.
true.
Well,
Yeah.
So he was very introspective and began to really ponder philosophy and existence during college, and may have earlier in his life, but it became definitely more prominent in college. A New York Times article by Simon Critchley wrote Dick's philosophical journey while he was there. Quote, at the University of California, Berkeley in 1949, he took and quit Philosophy 10A in the space of a few weeks. Dick left the class in disgust at the ignorance and intolerance of his instructor when he asked his professor about the plausibility of Plato's metaphysical theory of the forms. Unquote. Do you know anything about Plato's theory of the metaphysical theory of the forms?
I don't.
Do you know anything by Plato?
Honestly, no. To be honest, completely honest with you, I don't. I never took any philosophy, unfortunately, and when I was at UVM.
I took philosophy because I had to, and it was a mistake, honestly.
Oh, no.
I did not really enjoy it. And in the school I had to go to, you had to take a 1 year of a Christianity history class, 1 year of a philosophy, and then you were required to do a second year of either Christian history or any religion, because they taught Buddhism, Hinduism, history there.
Didn't know they did that there.
Yeah, I know, right? It was pretty great, actually. Cool. Or Eastern religions too as a class. Or you took another philosophy, and I took the second philosophy, and I should have just taken Christianity, honestly.
Sure.
Because I fucking aced that Christian 101 class without opening up a book. It was so easy.
Good.
That was what all my years of being a Christian schools or Catholic schools gave me.
It paid off.
It paid off. That A was just like sleeping through class, buddy. So this wouldn't be lost in the library if we didn't dig deep into this rabbit hole of Plato's metaphysical theory of the forms.
Okay.
Plato's theory of the forms is a foundational metaphysical concept suggesting that true reality is comprised of abstract ideal entities or forms which differ from how things appear. People initially see mere things like objects of a form, but not the real form. And eventually, one can perceive its true form if you're, enlightened enough. But if you're looking at it hard enough, this is taken from an example from thecollector.com of this metaphysical concept.
Okay.
Imagine you are looking at a table.
Okay.
It has various qualities and that are particular to that table. Say it's made of mahogany. It has twin legs. It's placed near the window, and so on. but there might be certain qualities that qualify it to be a table. In other words, certain qualities which explain how and why it is similar to other things we call tables. For Plato, this idea of a table is something we might be able to abstract from various individual tables, and that abstraction would be the form of the table.
Got it.
Forms are these abstract ideal entities. We cannot perceive them directly. So, right? So this is what Philip K. Dick, or P.K. Dick, was pondering at his teenage years. And yes, I will refer to him occasionally now as PKD, as his fans do, because I'm tired of using my own name or saying Dick.
Understand.
Do you get it, though? Like, there's a supreme table out there that would comprise, yeah.
Like the ultimate table, right? That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense that people would even care about thinking about it that way, because we all perceive the world a little differently. And like, why is that? I can also imagine some of those qualities can be a little subjective. It's like a mix of objective and subjective qualities that when we look at a table, and also it probably plays into the way people think about its value. And, you know, a table. We probably could talk a while about this.
Yeah.
I feel like you could talk about just a podcast of this alone, but I feel like I've definitely heard this theory before, but I like the example. That makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of sense why you can get a lot of people arguing about a single point, even though the physical object is right there in front of you. You know.
Yeah.
And also, literature plays around with this concept a lot, and people either misinterpret or interpret correctly, or the author's just like, you're screwed. Like, well, I'm just never going to explain this to you, right? It's like, it kind of leaves it, it's almost like open-ended like tool to kind of play with your readers' minds.
I'm so happy that we chose sci-fi in this particular one. Rogelio, you're really getting it.
All right, good.
Because, like, you know, this theory has been, let's say, discredited by a lot of philosophers, but, like, you know, it's also just a theory of the forms, right? It's a philosophical, metaphysical concept. It's not really anything.
I feel like the fact that we're talking about it so much and like trying to pick it apart in itself, it's like a meta reference to that theory. Like,
and I just want to note, this isn't his first foray into something like this. You know, it's he's going to really dig into some of some crazy concepts as we develop.
Cool.
Yeah, this philosophical talk, as I wrote here, will become more apparent and more important the more we talk about PKD, especially later in his life. His writing is filled with these abstract concepts that he is trying to convey in his work. And if you can imagine, PKD didn't really last long at UC Berkeley. He didn't even finish a semester.
Oh, dang.
No,
a semester?
He didn't finish a semester.
What?
Yep.
Whoa.
He left in November. That same month, he and his wife divorced. That marriage wasn't going to very last long, just based how it started.
Yeah, 100%.
This was Dick's first wife.
Okay, I take it there's going to be many more. Or first. Okay, understood.
Philip K. Dick started his early writing career shortly after his divorce, and he's leaving tertiary education. He published his first story in 1951 at the age of 22 called Roog. As Wikipedia describes it, it was about, quote, a dog who imagined that the garbage men who came every Friday morning were stealing valuable food, which the family had carefully stored away in a safe metal container, unquote.
That's pretty cool.
I know, right? It's a good concept of a story.
Yeah.
And Roog comes from the sound that he makes when he's barking at the...
all right.
I know.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know.
I like that.
It's a fun story. He called it serious, but I don't know how that was serious. Like that.
Maybe it's like projecting that dogs are actually dead serious animals as opposed to like the crazy ball of energy that they can be sometimes.
Yeah, as our dogs like can't get out of the sun.
Yeah, she is right now.
Just loving life. Yeah. PKD was now a full-time author, publishing speculative fiction and science fiction in publications such as the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, Planet Stories, and a publication that's simply called If. Also in the early 1950s, he met and began to court another woman, Cleo Apostolides, I believe. It's a very Greek last name.
That's sweet.
These two would get married on June 14th, 1950. So he got divorced in November 1949, and within 7 months, he's married again. Now I'm going to jump ahead.
Rebound. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoop. Again, a repeated pattern in his life.
Yes.
Now I'm going to jump ahead for the sake of my own references and tell you that this marriage doesn't last forever. However, the two seem to be in love, like genuinely in love with each other. They were friends even after the divorce. Cleo would marry another man named Norman Minnie and be legally named Cleo Apostopoulos Dick Minnie, which, if put in a different order, would be a lot more funny and immature. I know. I know. And she kept Dick Minnie too, I think. I think so.
It was just like teetering on the line of being funny. Just like right there. Also, it makes me wonder if like the surname Dick was more dignified back then, or if it was always funny. Like, at what point did people start being like, like chuckling at a last name like that? Like, it had to be a point, right?
Yeah. Oh, what's his name? There's a infamous at this point actor. His last name is Dick, and he's like, he's like a comedian. God, I forget his first name, but he's apparently just a complete and total drunkard. Like, can't get out of his own way. Like, everybody has a story in L.A. about him like being a scumbag at some point. Like, it's really
yeah.
Gosh, this is gonna bother me. Not Harvey. What's his name? Whatever. Yeah.
If it comes back to you mid.
Yeah.
Mid podcast, just say it, and then we'll get back on track.
Yeah,
it'll happen.
I would definitely remember it. All of this is to say that Chloe and Norman had a girl together, Anne, and from her account of PKD, so not her father, but her mother's ex-husband,
right,
is Philip. In this, PKD was somebody she could really rely on and have a good relationship with.
Wow.
He became her writing teacher, and when her father was dying, she turned to him to confide in her grief, and nobody else. She didn't even turn to his mom.
That's wild.
I know.
Whoa.
All of this is to introduce her as a reference, really, because this is what she had to say about her mother and her father. Her mother's first husband, not her father. Quote, Cleo is a pretty outstanding woman. She was only 17 when she met Phil. He was her first serious boyfriend, in fact. They were together for 10 years, the time period he first began writing with an eye on selling his work. Yes, 17 and 22. If not weird, then definitely bordering on it today.
Yep. Yeah.
I think this was a little bit more commonplace back in the day, in the 50s.
Yeah.
She was probably 18 when they married.
Okay.
So, still. So that's two 18-year-olds.
Gotcha.
You know, let's just start with that one.
He has a type.
From Anne Minnie's perspective, and by the way, this was all taken from an interview she did in 2008, it sounds like Cleo was really the person who helped support Philip in his early writing career. Quote, he was too reclusive to join a critique group, so she routinely took his early short stories and hers to well-known writers' groups in Berkeley, jotted down the feedback, and carried it back to Philip so he could revise. She was actually the one who handled the sale of his first short story. Kind of astonishing, given that she was both going to college and working to support them both at the time, because he wasn't making money. Yeah, because he was trying to sell short stories.
Dang.
So, propped up by the woman that he loves. She continues, quote, Philip and Cleo stuffed each of his short stories into a gray manila envelope with a stamped self-addressed second envelope folded up inside and sent them off to any magazine that had evinced even the remotest interest in science fiction or fantasy. When a short story was rejected, as in the beginning all of Philip's and Cleo's were, and landed once again mailbox with the accuracy of a well-flung boomerang. That's what she writes.
I like that. It's kind of poetic.
I know.
Good. That's cool.
It caught me off guard.
Yeah.
They acted as professional writers should act. They submitted the rejected story to another magazine immediately. To minimize retyping, they would iron any pages, and they had gotten bent in the mail, slip the manuscript into a fresh manila envelope, and send it to the next prospective publisher.
Oh, that's smart.
Oh,
that's wild. I'm just thinking about, like, I forget, like, mechanically you can just make another copy like that. That's
yeah, you had to type it. It's the 50s. It's before printers.
Right, just like easy duplication. That's a lot of work. I mean, that's labor of love there. Get these going.
As most people relying solely on their early novels or early works, PKD did not have what you would consider a healthy income. He once stated that, quote, we couldn't even pay the late fees on a library book, unquote.
Oh, no.
I know. which I think I have a late library book. I'm thinking about it now. He also wanted to become a serious mainstream writer, writing typical and literary fiction. In the 1950s, while he was publishing science fiction stories, he was also writing copious amounts of normie fiction, as I'm calling it.
Huh.
However, his normie fiction kept getting rejected. He once claimed that he was willing to take 20 to 30 years to succeed as a literary writer, but none of this ever really came to fruition.
Gotcha.
He didn't get rejected. What didn't get rejected, however, were his works in science fiction and his science fiction novels. His debut novel, called The Solar Lottery, was published in 1955. It was published alongside another novel called The Big Jump by Lee Brackett. That's not really important. What is important, as it was half of a whole book, as the publisher Ace Books had a series of Ace doubles that did this sort of thing. They published 2 books at once, hence the doubles.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's the premise of the novel, again, taken from Wikipedia. Quote, Solar Lottery takes place in a world dominated by logic and numbers and loosely based on a numerical military strategy employed by U.S. and Soviet intelligence called Millimax. It's part of a game theory. The quizmaster, head of the world government, is chosen through a sophisticated computerized lottery called sortition. This element of randomization serves as a form of social control, since nobody, in theory at least, has any advantage over anybody else, their chances becoming the next quizmaster. Society is entertained by a televised selection process in which an assassin is also allegedly chosen at random. By countering and putting down threats to his life, using telepathic bodyguards, the leader gains the respect of the people. If he loses his life, a new quizmaster, as well as another assassin, are gained randomly selected. Unquote.
Wow.
I know, right?
Dang. Okay. I really appreciate that science fiction back then had a lot of political bent. Like, it was a lot of, how would I say this? Like, a lot of political themes, very like bent in like that sort of like direction. I think about like Huxley's Brave New World a lot when I think about this era of science fiction. That's wow.
Yeah, and the politics on this one is going to be very it's going to impact his life very shortly.
Got it.
So this was written in 1955, and yep, that's going to be very, very quick. So the 1950s also saw him 5 additional novels throughout and dozens of short stories and novellas. One of these novellas was The Minority Report. Do you know? Is that familiar to you at all? The Minority Report?
I just think about the movie.
That's exactly
that I haven't seen, but it's based off the same work of, the same writing.
Yep. It's a small, so it's a novella, so it's a small piece of literature. It's longer than a short story.
Got it.
It turned into a film in 2002 starring Tom Cruise.
Yep. Whoa.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's wild.
This prolific nature will be also part of his writing style and would eventually become something that would lead to his eventual demise. Remember that sexiest of literary devices, Rogelio?
Yeah.
Remember what it's called?
Are we talking about our metaphysical?
Oh, no, we're talking about foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. Oh, okay. I'm back on board now. Yes.
That's a callback from the very first episode we recorded. Foreshadowing.
That's true.
Yeah. Foreshadowing is the foreplay that leads to the climax within literature. I wanted to say that so bad. I wrote that.
I could tell because you were gritting through that whole entire thing.
Yes. Okay. Well, Philip K. Dick, as many people did in the 1950s, attended Communist and Socialist Party meetings. I think this was on the insistence of Cleo, his wife, or at least that's what PKD portrays it as. Mm-hmm. It was in 1955, so the same year as the first book that he wrote, The Solar Lottery, was published, that Dick had a run-in, or his first run-in, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. From an interview he had with Joe Vitale of the publication The Aquarian in 2002, he had, quote, many friendly visits from Mr. Smith and Mr. Scruggs of the FBI.
Those just obviously sound like fake names. I don't know. They sound fake.
They're
Smith and
they're
Scruggs.
definitely fake names. They just chose 2 names. I knew somebody with the last name Scruggs. I played rugby with him.
Sweet.
Yeah, he now lives in Kansas City. Okay, I probably have to bleep out his name. If you're listening to this, fellow player, hi. All right, yeah. Continuing this quote. They were members of the famous Red Squad. They became so Mr. Smith and Mr. Scruggs of the FBI were the famous Red Squad. They came to my house every week for what seemed like ever and ever and ever, and they asked many questions about my life and my writings and my political philosophy. This, of course, made me very angry and very frightened. They asked me all about my wife, about her political philosophy, about what student groups she belonged to. I mean, I honestly expected to be called before the House Un-American Activities
100%.
Committee, but I guess they don't consider science fiction writers that important, unquote.
Right. And I was just not being rude here, but I was wondering, is that that wasn't during the Red Scare, was it?
Yes, it absolutely was.
Okay.
It's right in the heart of it. The House Un-American Activities Committee is right in the heart of it.
Wow.
That is, what's his name's FBI? Hoover? Yeah.
Sounds right.
Yeah, Hoover's FBI.
Yeah, 'cause they were basically knocking on whoever was the least bit different
Yes.
in any shape or form.
They wanted to they wanted to stamp out any leftist movement in the country, and they basically succeeded.
Yeah.
They blackmailed everybody. You know, everybody's, you know, this whole political philosophy or political theater, about trans people, and we had J. Edgar Hoover literally dressing in women's clothes and like taking down all the left at the same time. You never knew about J. Edgar Hoover? No, you don't know about the head of the FBI in the 50s, the 60s?
No, but I know the name, but I don't know anything about him.
Yeah. He's a real piece of work. And he hated gay people, he hated a whole bunch of people, and he loved to dress in women's underwear and dance around the FBI head of his office there. Facts. This would not be the last experience he had with the FBI. And on that cliffhanger, I'm going to leave you with the knowledge that we have not even touched upon his successes yet. We are going to continue throughout his life, his mental journey. However, this is a pretty long script, and I think this is the best place, even though this is a shortened podcast week, to end this week, only because it's going to get a lot longer and going to get a lot crazier from here on end. And we are ending right around 1959.
1959.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Any questions?
A lot has happened in 30 years, right about?
Yeah, he's about 30 years old at this point.
That's a lot of ground he's covered.
Yeah, he's written, 6 novels, if I'm counting correctly.
6 novels, 2 wives, moved a number of times.
Dozens of short stories, and starting to actually become a real publisher. Yeah. So, I'm just going to do the sources here really quick, because I'm going to do it for both of them, because I don't think I'm going to be able to have the tolerance for the second one to do sources. But tortured Blade Runner genius Philip K. Dick hated babies, once thought aliens controlled him and tried to kill 2 wives, by Grant Rollings of The Sun.
Okay.
Yep. A Life of Philip K. Dick, the Man Who Remembered the Future, by Anthony Peake, writing for the New Dawn. Amazing Stories magazine, Mad Flight of the Manic Phoenix, or Philip K. Dick in Vancouver, by R. Green Cameron. National Library of Medicine's articles.
Okay.
Philip K. Dick's Masterpiece Years, by Scott Timberg, writing for the New York Times. Another New York Times article by Ann R. Dick, this time memorist and... The article is called Ann R. Dick, memoirist and writer. Writer's Muse is Dead at 90, by Dave Stretfield. Another New York Times article. This one's called Philip K. Dick, Sci-Fi Philosopher, Part 1, by Simon Critchley. There's 3 parts. I only use the first one.
Whoa.
Yeah, there's no reason to use the other 2, I think. The Strange Vancouver Visitation of Philip K. Dick, by Adrian Mack in Monte Cristo magazine. The Interview with Anne Minnie. I don't know who did it, but there was an interview with her. The Need for Speed, by John Ozerski, Medium publication. What is Plato's Theory of the Forms, by Luke Dunn, The Collector.
Very nice.
Thank you, Luke. That was helpful. An Interview with America's Most Brilliant Science Fiction Writer, Philip K. Dick, by Joe Vitale for The Aquarian. Philip K. Dick biography, philipkdick.com, The Salon article, 8 Facts You Need to Know About Philip K. Dick, by Katie Dancy Downs. Phil and Jack, by Matthew Cheney from Strange Horizons. And I'm like, come on, dude. Like, Matthew, it's Jack and Phil. It's not Phil and Jack. It's Jack and Phil. Jack and Phil went up the hill. And then an ubu.com media interview and loads of Wikipedia articles for good measure. Do you have any questions before we get into the second part and before we move our cars so my wife can leave the driveway?
Who were the other authors? That's what I wanted to ask you earlier. Who were the other authors you were considering for this?
Yeah.
You had to name the top 2 or 3.
Octavia Butler.
Okay. Oh yeah, you mentioned.
Yeah. She's a super cool woman. She passed away, I think, in 2006.
Got it.
But yeah, I was considering her, but I've never read anything by her, and I didn't have enough time to pick up a book for her. And I'm not going to do an author if I haven't read stuff by them. But I definitely plan on doing her. Another was Arthur C. Clarke.
Oh yeah,
that one.
Yep.
I'm just a little bit timid of doing the big 3, as they called science fiction writers.
That is probably like one of the biggest, right? Period.
Yeah,
in our more modern day.
Yeah, and the last one is H.P. Lovecraft, but I don't know if you know anything about H.P. Lovecraft.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. There's I'm not going to do that one until I do other authors for a very fucking specific reason.
Sure.
Because he was very controversial in his early life, to say the least.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. Thanks for the first part. Please, if you have any questions or suggestions, reach out to lostinthelibrarypodcast@gmail.com. I'm also creating a Substack as we speak. It's at my name, Fil Deptula. It's Substack, so follow. Follow us on all the platforms that you listen to podcasts on. This is pretty much everywhere. I'm also going to be building a Patreon soon, too, so please donate when that comes out. It's going to be Lost in the Library podcast, I believe, or just my name, Fil Deptula. More to determine. And also like, subscribe, and comment on whatever platform. That's the way. This is the best way to grow, share, because it's actually quite a decent amount of work to do this, and I'm really enjoying it. And I really enjoy having you on.
Good. Aw, shucks. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. So on to part 2 next.